as part of their sophisticated information and disinformation operations, engage actively with so-called non-governmental organizations, environmental organizations working against shale gas, obviously to maintain European dependence on imported Russian gas. That's my interpretation.
That's the former NATO Secretary General accusing Russia of infiltrating anti-fracking environmental lobby groups, not because they care about the environment, because Russia doesn't want American shale gas industry to do well and to take root in Europe. They don't want America to have energy independence, and they don't want Europe to have energy independence. They want Russian oil and gas companies to dominate Europe and continue their dependence on Vladimir Putin's conflict oil and gas. Well, Washington Free Beacon writer Lachlan Markay has actually connected the dots and found out there are indeed clear ties from Russian gas companies to environmentalist groups in North America, too. He joins me with the evidence from Washington, D.C. Welcome to the show, Lachlan. Now, I have never been able to prove a link. As my friend Fella McAleer says, Vladimir Putin would be crazy not to support Western environmental groups, and we know that they morally support Western environmental groups, but you've been able to document actual flows of money from Russia to North American environmentalist groups. Is that true?
Well, we need to be careful, implying a direct link here, because there is no smoking gun. But what I was able to show was that specifically one group that's based out of Bermuda, this very shadowy company, has been funneling, they've given about $23 million to U.S. environmental groups. And some of the executives at that company are also executives at, investment funds with holdings in Russian oil and gas, and other companies with links to very high up members of state-owned companies in Russia.
So it's 1 degree of separation. It's not the Russian companies themselves. It's people who are executives in a company that also have holdings in Russia. Is that a more accurate way of phrasing it?
Right. Well, it all goes back to this Bermuda-based law firm called Wakefield Quinn that I go into in some of the things I've been writing. They represent this company, Klein Limited, that's been donating all this money. They also represent at least 7 subsidiaries of a state-owned Russian bank. One of their executives works for an investment fund whose vice president used to be the chairman of Rosneft, the state-owned oil company. So there are a lot of links there. It might just be a mutual relationship between these donors and the Russian clients of the same law firm, but the connections are there, even if we can't point to a direct link.
We have taken your diagram and recreated. Let's put it on the screen right now, because it is complicated, which is not surprising. And Klein Limited, tell me, do we know what Klein Limited does? We know that Wakefield Quinn is the law firm. And from Klein Limited to Sea Change and to various environmental groups, the Sierra Club, we know all about them. The NRDC, that is an anti-oil sands group that's big in the United States. And LCV, that's what the League of Conservation Voters. What do we know about Klein Limited? What do they do? Have you reached out to Klein Limited and asked them about this?
We know virtually nothing about them. We know they have ties to a gentleman by the name of Nathaniel Simons, who you mentioned, the Sea Change Foundation. That's his foundation. But really the only information we know is what I found in incorporation documents filed with the government of Bermuda, which just showed 2 officers of the company, both of whom are employees of this law firm, Wakefield Quinn. So that's the extent of their documented activities beyond the $23 million that they gave to Sea Change in 2010 and 2011. Now, I reached out to Wakefield Quinn, to the people listed. They would not return my calls. So that's the extent of what we know about them. And Bermuda, of course, entities are incorporated there precisely so that they can operate with the degree of opacity that allows them to undertake some of these more sketchy transactions. Oh.
Now, $23 million is a lot of money to you and me, but in the scope of environmental groups, it's actually small potatoes. I mean, Greenpeace alone has a $300–400 million a year international budget. Do you think that this is the tip of the iceberg? I mean, I know it's speculation. It sounds like you had to do a lot of hard work to find this $23 million. Do you think there's more? Do you think Putin or even the OPEC Arab states have propped up environmental groups and we just don't know about it?
It's entirely possible, and I wouldn't put it past the Kremlin or Russian oligarchs to go about that. But it requires sifting through a lot of very complex financial data. And these instruments are designed precisely to avoid the sort of transparency that would allow us to prove that. So, I wouldn't be surprised to find more information out there to that effect. But as of now, this is the extent of the links we've been able to draw.
Lachlan Markay of the Washington Free Beacon, thank you very much for being on the show and for your investigative journalism. More soon.